Chip Titans clash, TSMC versus Intel, 2.
All of this must take truly massive investment, right?
Oh, astronomical. TSMC has pledged a $100 billion investment in the United States alone over 4 years. That includes a $6.6 billion package they received from the Biden administration as part of the TPS Act. And their 2025 capital expenditure forecast, their CapEx, remains unchanged at a huge $38 to $42 billion. And that money is laser focused on these advanced nodes and this global expansion. It shows immense confidence and a clear long-term strategy. They're effectively using government incentives to de-risk their geographic diversification.
Okay, but Intel isn't just sitting back and watching this happen, are they?
Yeah.
Their IDM 2.0 strategy is a pretty bold countermove. What's the real gamble here for them, and how are they actually doing in this high-stakes race?
Yeah, this really raises an important question about Intel's future. They aim to achieve what they call process leadership by 2025. It's an incredibly ambitious roadmap, but it's definitely a steep climb fraught with some notable challenges and, somewhat ironically, some surprising reliance on their main competitor, TSMC.
How so?
Well, CEO Pat Gelsinger's IDM 2.0 plan, announced back in 2021, it involved continuing their traditional in-house chip production, while also aggressively expanding Intel Foundry Services, or IFS. The goal there is to directly compete with TSMC. Their stated goal is to become the world's second largest foundry by 2030. And to get there, they've committed to this aggressive roadmap of 5 nodes in 4 years.
5 nodes in 4 years. That just sounds like a desperate sprint. What does this breakneck pace tell us about Intel's strategic gamble and maybe even internal pressure?
Well, it certainly speaks to a profound sense of urgency. The first few nodes, Intel 7, that was formerly their 10-millimeter enhanced superfin, used in chips like Alder Lake and Raptor Lake, and Intel 4, their 7-millimeter equivalent, those laid the groundwork. Intel 4 was their first to use extreme ultraviolet lithography, EUV, found in Meteor Lake chips, though interestingly, the graphics tile on Meteor Lake is actually made by TSMC on their N3 node.
Oh.
Then came Intel 3, which was a performance boost aimed at data centers for chips like Sierra Forest and Granite Rapids Xeon 6. But the real strategic gamble, the big bet, lies in their bleeding-edge nodes, Intel 20A and Intel 18A.
Right, 20A and 18A. What's the story there?
So Intel 20A, that's their 2-millimeter equivalent. It was originally intended to debut with the Arrow Lake processors and bring in new architectural innovations like PowerVia, that's backside power delivery, and Ribbon FET, which is Intel's term for Gate-All-Around FETs, or GAFETs. Yeah. Major new tech. But here's the twist. Arrow Lake, or at least key parts of it, is now actually being produced by TSMC.
Really? So they outsourced the chip meant to debut their comeback now?
Seems that way, at least partially. And this seems to have forced Intel to shift resources from 20A into their even more advanced node, Intel 18A.
Okay, so Intel 18A is now their biggest bet then. And it's still quite striking, isn't it, that despite these massive foundry ambitions, they're still relying on TSMC for key products like Lunar Lake as well. What does that outsourcing reality tell us about the sheer difficulty of this pivot?
It absolutely is their biggest bet now. Intel 18A is their 1.8-millimeter equivalent, and they say it's set to begin manufacturing in the latter half of 2024, so very soon. It promises up to a 10% performance per watt increase and doubles down on those RibbonFET and PowerVia technologies. Their upcoming Panther Lake chip is expected to debut with this 18A node. But yes, the reliance on TSMC for products like Lunar Lake, which uses TSMC's N3B and N6 nodes and parts of Arrow Lake, even while trying to become a major foundry themselves, it really highlights the immense complexity and the staggering capital intensity involved in catching up in advanced manufacturing. It suggests that while Intel has ambitious plans for its own fabs, the current reality of leading-edge production capacity still heavily leans on TSMC's established prowess.
And how is this reflected in the financials for Intel's foundry business, IFS?
Well, the challenge is definitely reflected there. IFS reported a significant operating loss of $7 billion on $19 billion revenue back in April 2024. That was a 31% year-over-year decline in revenue for the foundry segment. The division remains unprofitable, and critically, it still seems to lack major external foundry customers, the kind TSMC thrives on. Compounding this, Intel cut its 2025 gross capital expenditure forecast down to $18 billion. And they've poured significant capital into fabs like the $30 billion complex in Ohio that might currently be underutilized. That represents a significant drag on their overall financial health.
But are they making any headway on securing new partnerships or collaborations? Anything to boost those foundry?
Yes, absolutely. They're not standing still. Intel is collaborating with IBM on EUV technology, which is crucial. They are also working closely with ARM to provide advanced foundry services for ARM-based SoCs, which could open up significant market opportunities beyond their traditional x86 space.
Interesting. ARM partnership is key. And speaking of big bets, on the ASML front, the company that makes the EUV machines, we see Intel making a huge gamble on the new high-NA EUV machines, while TSMC seems to be more cautious. What's behind that difference in approach?
That's a really fascinating divergence in strategy right now. Intel has become the first chip maker to actually assemble one of ASML's brand new high-NA EUV machines. These things cost around 350 million each.
350 million euros for one machine.
Exactly. It's a very expensive, cutting-edge piece of lithography equipment. In contrast, TSMC is being more cautious. They've indicated they find them too expensive for their upcoming A16 node, at least for the initial rollout. This really indicates Intel's aggressive stance, maybe even a necessary gamble, to push the very limits of lithography technology to try and regain that process leadership, even at an extremely high cost. Meanwhile, TSMC seems to be prioritizing a perhaps more cost-effective scaling path for its next generation of chips, focusing on optimizing existing EUV before jumping to high-NA.
Okay, let's step back now from these two titans. What are the overarching currents, the big trends, shaping the entire semiconductor industry as we look towards 2025 and beyond?
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the industry is undoubtedly poised for significant growth. That seems clear. And it's primarily fueled by the AI revolution. But at the same time, it's navigating some really complex challenges, everything from geopolitical tensions to a critical talent gap. What's really striking is that for the first time, AI has become the single most important application driving semiconductor revenue. Cloud and data centers have risen to second place.
And what dropped?
Automotive. It actually fell to fourth place after being number one for the last couple of years. That's a huge strategic shift in market focus right there.
A massive shift driven by AI. And that's driving overall growth projections, too.
It absolutely is. Microprocessors, and that includes GPUs, which are essential for AI, again ranked as the top product opportunity for industry growth. Spending on AI semiconductors alone is projected to reach something like $174 billion in 2025. And that's expected to grow to $280 billion by 2028.
Wow, just staggering numbers.
They really are. It just speaks to the sheer insatiable demand that AI is generating across pretty much every sector. And you see this reflected in industry sentiment. The 2025 KPMG Global Semiconductor Industry Outlook Survey showed really strong confidence. 86% of senior executives projected their company's revenue will grow. 63% expect to increase semiconductor capital spending, and 72% plan to increase R&D spending. This optimism is undeniably driven by that AI momentum, but also by government funding initiatives like the US APPS Act.
Okay, so lots of growth, lots of optimism fueled by AI and government support. But with all this potential, what are the biggest headwinds? What are the major concerns keeping executives up at night?
Well, the top two issues actually tied for first place in that KPMG survey are talent risk, basically, a shortage of skilled workers and territorialism tariffs, the geopolitical stuff. On the talent side, the numbers are pretty stark. For instance, the U.S. could see maybe 67,000 new semiconductor industry jobs go unfilled by 2030. Europe needs an estimated 400,000 more workers by 2030. India faces a potential deficit of maybe 250,000 to 300,000 professionals by 2027.
Huge numbers globally.
Huge. And you have non-traditional companies like the big tech giants and automotive firms now expanding their own chip design capabilities. That's only increasing the competition for this already scarce talent pool. This isn't just, a minor concern. It's a potential bottleneck for global innovation moving forward.
So a serious global talent crunch on top of everything else. And geopolitics remains a top-of-mind issue, too, you said.
Absolutely. Geopolitical concerns are significant, particularly for the larger multinational companies. There are high concerns regarding armed conflicts, tariffs, and the potential for government subsidies to distort global markets. The prominence of Taiwan in the supply chain is, understandably, a major focus of concern. The survey showed 54% expressing high concern about potential nationalization risks and 69% about armed conflicts affecting the region.
69% worried about conflict impacting Taiwan.
Yes. And 63% worried about tariffs specifically related to Taiwan. Plus, you have things like the recent U.S. tariffs on Chinese general-purpose semiconductors, an additional 25%, and broadening export controls. All these factors are forcing companies to fundamentally reconsider their manufacturing footprints and production strategies.
And how are companies responding specifically to these complex supply chain challenges, especially with all these geopolitical pressures intensifying?
Well, the number one action leaders expect to take, according to the survey, is increasing the geographical diversity of their supply chain. Makes sense, right? Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Companies are also investing heavily in digitizing their supply chains using data and AI for better visibility and prediction, and also in building more sustainable practices. This whole move towards more localized or at least diversified supply chains is a direct response to the disruptions everyone saw during the pandemic and the ongoing geopolitical instability. It's a shift away from a purely just-in-time model to one that also prioritizes resilience, or just in case.
Right, resilience becoming as important as efficiency. Finally, how is generative AI being adopted within the semiconductor industry itself? Are they using the tools they help create?
Oh, they absolutely are. Semiconductor companies are implementing generative AI primarily in IT functions and crucially in R&D and engineering right now. Think chip design, verification, process optimization. Looking ahead, they plan to expand its use into areas like supply chain management and even marketing and sales within the next year or so. The U.S. appears to be leading the charge in Gen AI implementation within the industry currently. It's truly transforming the industry from the inside out, from how chips are designed to how complex global logistics are managed.